I was listening to all the presentations yesterday and today, and what I noticed was that Maldives is not very well known among people. Everybody talks about shared borders, languages, things that are so similar, and there are so many anecdotes about this side of the border and that side of the border, but when it comes to the Maldives, there aren't many stories for people to tell or anecdotes. So I was thinking, as Professor Ghosh said yesterday, one of the biggest weaknesses we have is that we don't know about each other very much. So I thought I will leave the paper to one side and talk about the Maldives and what's been happening. There's also been a lot said about South Asia and the nations in South Asia, which are so diverse. Everybody has so many languages, so many religions, but that's not true about the Maldives. So when you talk about nations in South Asia which are all diverse, it's not true. Maldives has only one religion. People are required by the constitution to be Muslims. You cannot be anything else. If you want to become a Maldivian, you have to be a Muslim. So secularism is gone. You can't even talk about it. It's dirty. It's a very dirty word. And democracy. I think yesterday a lot of people said all of South Asia is now democratic, but that's not true either. Maldives is really going, backtracking into authoritarianism so fast that at the moment, as I speak, people are starting to protest nationwide against the government. And I think it's going to crack down on the protesters today. So I know everybody probably knows where the islands are, but when I'm in Dublin and I say I'm from the Maldives, a lot of people tell me I've been to Mauritius. So I kind of wanted to show where it is. In our history, we were Buddhists for a very, very long time, for about 800 years. But that's all gone, written out of history. It's not talked about because our identity, as we know it, begins from the time we became Muslims. So Buddhism is as if it never happened. So as soon as we reverted back to the current situation where politics is in real flux, the first thing Islamists did was run into the museum and destroy all the relics that were from the Buddhist era. So I want to show you, what I want to do is show you a lot of pictures because I don't have time for words. I'll be cutting short everything. So I'll just show you the transformation that's happened in the Maldives through pictures. This was in the 1800s, the first picture. And you can see similarities between Maldivian ways of dressing, being that were very similar to other parts of South Asia. And there was a lot of Sufi Islam in the Maldives also, a lot of the practices that Absi was talking about earlier today can be related back to the spiritualism of the Sufi side of Islam, which was in the Maldives. And this was one of our kings. So the dress and the way people looked weren't very dissimilar to the rest of South Asia. This is a president, and I think that may be his wife. And the way she's dressed in a sari, everybody, all the women, especially of higher classes, used to wear saris. This is our national dress, which was introduced in the 1950s, and which most people used to wear. These are like through different times, people evolving with their different kinds of clothes, what it was like, dancing, drums. This was all a big part of who we were. That's me in the little salwar kameez when I was 7 or something. So it was all part of being South Asian, was very much in the Maldivian culture. The schoolgirls, and that was all. The parts that I've shown are from Mali, where even though it's remote, it's still connected to the rest of the world. But in the islands, things were very different because people didn't have access to TV. They didn't really know much of what was going on in the rest of the world. So these are how islanders used to look, what their life was like. You could see a little bit of, and it's very similar to Sri Lanka, which is where we actually came from, a lot of us. And then in the 1970s, things started to change. And this is our former president, who was in power from 1978 to 2008. That's his wedding picture. I don't know how I got it, it's on the internet. But he's the one who started bringing in, until then, Islam was very much a part of who we are, our identity. But it wasn't in the forefront of our consciousness. It wasn't what defined us as people, even though it was part of us. But he studied in the Azra University, and he came and he wanted to unify Maldivian Islam. By unifying, he meant that we had to do it in the way that he had learned from Azhar. So he started this every week distributing a newsletter which had his kind of what he wanted Islam to be in the Maldives. He started bringing Egyptian scholars, not scholars, people who gave lectures. There wasn't much intellectual discussions going on. The Islam that we knew were the 5 pillars to pray, and everybody adhered to these 5 pillars. So society was really pleasant to be in, and I think Islam had a lot to do with it, because nobody was, there was very little crime. There was hardly ever a murder. I was a journalist for a long time, and I never got to write about a murder, and I was thinking, oh, this is not very exciting being a journalist here. There's no news. But so things went on. Nobody was really allowed to think for themselves. So there was peace, there was stability of sorts. But then, of course, this can't go on forever. So democracy happened in 2008. But before that, there was something which affected the Maldivian psyche, which was the tsunami. This is our island. This is the capital of Maldives, and it's going down very fast. So when the tsunami happened, it was a time that, relatively speaking, what happened to us isn't as serious as what happened to the rest of South Asia, like Colombo or Sri Lanka and places. But it's also a time when the war on terror was going on. The world was becoming more religious all over, and Saudi funding had started in most Islamic countries with most Islamic populations. They poured a lot of funding into the Maldives, and with the tsunami, they were able to say to people, this is the result of you not being proper Muslims. So you have to reform yourselves. You have to be good. You have to be true Muslims. And that meant the Saudi way of being Wahhabi Muslim, Salafi Muslim. So this is where they got a real strong hold on the Maldivian consciousness. I'm actually, I specialize in terrorism research. The bio said something that I don't even recognize about my thesis. But so what I have learned from looking into terrorism is that when there is democracy, it is easier for radical thought to survive, for Islamist thought or any kind of radical ideas to survive. So terrorism is easier when there is democracy. So the people who had all these radical ideas, Islamist ideas, were able to penetrate society very easily. And they did through traditional media and also through a network that's offline. So there's a big online network and an offline one that is also working at the same time. So the funding poured into the Maldives meant a lot of people were going to Pakistani madrasas to get educated. A lot of people were going to Yemen. A lot of people were going to Saudi Arabia. And they were coming back. And because of our geography, it's 1,200 islands. It's scattered across the Indian Ocean. There's 2 days travel between the northernmost and the southernmost islands. And there are people living on some islands with a population of about 1,000 people, 600 people. So it takes one radical cleric to go to an island, stay there for about 6 months, or maybe he's from the island, and talk to people. And it's very easy to change their way of thinking. And it's like they tell them, this is the real Islam. This is the true Islam. This is what you have to be if you want to be a Muslim. So you see, all of a sudden things start changing. And internet helped, because today somebody was talking about how the internet is increasing in India, but we have about 40% of our population are online. Everybody is on Facebook. Almost everybody is on Facebook. A lot of people are on Twitter. So it's very easy to spread the ideas of this kind of ideas to people who are in the remote islands as well. So I'll skip through there was a democracy and the first democratically elected government came to an end in February 2012. There was a coup, and the Islamists played a very big role in the coup, because there's debate over whether there's a coup or not as well. But a lot of Islamists were involved in changing people's opinion about whether democracy is a good thing or a bad thing. So democracy, they said, was against Islam. The two things cannot go together. In schools, it was taught that democracy is not bringing any stability to the country. Stability is good. So at the cost of human rights, you need stability. So I come to see this, I've only started. So this is what things are like today. I'm not saying this is what everybody is like, but this is where we are. I'll go through the pictures so you can see. The pictures that I showed you before from the islands, these are pictures I took in the islands in 2012, 13. This is how everybody's changed. This is from the 1970s. This is now. No, time doesn't stand still. And this month, an agreement has been signed with Saudi Arabia to have religious unity between Maldives and Saudi Arabia. And this is what the Saudi Islamic Affairs Minister said. And this is what the Maldivian Islamic Minister said when they were signing this. So my question is, what do you think as South Asians of a country like this, the vision that they have for the Maldives, if it does become reality? How do you then talk about South Asia as this shared identity that we are talking about forging? I'll leave that.